I'm Brett Strauss, the Vice President of HR Services here at PayEntry. And today we're going to talk about texting with employees. It's something that has kind of evolved, especially in a remote work environment post-COVID. A lot of our clients, communicate via text, and that's okay as long as we have some controls in place. And it doesn't necessarily matter where you're located geographically. Some states have different legislation behind employee communications. Some are a little bit more loose, but today we're going to talk about some best practices for all. Okay, as we jump in, just a quick disclaimer here. PayEntry is not a law firm, right? The presentation today is intended for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon in reaching a conclusion in a particular area of law. Applicability of the legal principles that we talk about today will absolutely differ. Okay, today we're going to talk about the advantages. We're going to talk about some considerations that you need to keep in mind, how to open up and make adjustments to your employee handbook and the policies and procedures that you are messaging to your teams, and then how I might be able to help you moving forward. Clearly, technology has changed in the way that we, as an organization, choose to communicate with our employees each month. I've seen a big shift, especially now post-COVID, when we have people that are remote. It used to be a little bit easier. We saw everybody face to face each day, and we can kind of communicate with them directly. But now that we have hybrid work environments, we have remote work environments, um, you know, the the game has changed, right? The way that we interact with people has changed, and convenience, right? We want to be able to get information very quickly, right? It's more efficient, convenient, it's fast, and it's informal. It's not as kind of stuffy as the face-to-face conversation or the face-to-face meeting. So I see this happening a lot. But if in your workforce, texting employees is something that is a benefit for you, and it's a way that you want to communicate. See it a lot in retail, in restaurants. Employees are texting back and forth. A manager maybe gets involved looking for somebody to cover a shift. It happens a lot in sometimes in sales. Managers are communicating with employees. They want to know, hey, how did that meeting go? How did this happen? How did that happen? And that's all fine, but we need to make sure that we have a detailed policy in the handbook that outlines the rules of engagement. Even though it's a text, right, it still needs to be formal, it needs to be clear, and it needs to be professional. Okay. We are not texting employees in the same style format that we would be texting friends, or family members or our kids. Okay. It needs to be professional communication. A lot of issues occur when I see situations where we have maybe an employee, we have an employee to employee relationship, right? Brett and Dina have worked together for a long time, and now Brett has been promoted, right, to the manager, or Dina has been promoted, and we have these communications, but now instead of employee to employee, right, now we have a supervisor to employee. And that relationship has changed, therefore the communication tends to change. And it's about working with those employees and helping them understand what it means now that you're in a leadership position, and what is our policy going to be with regards to communicating to employees. Right, we're not necessarily sending emojis to employees. We're not sending photos, and we'll talk about gifts and other things. It needs to be professional communication. If you have a policy that outlines, hey, a common one. If you are running late, if you're going to be late to work, you're going to, text your manager, or, or call the manager. No problem. The response back from the manager to the employee should be as, professional. Thank you, Dina, for notifying me. I've received your message that you're running late. No problem. I'm going to notify HR so that they can, adjust your timesheet, however your policy is. But where things start to kind of go sideways is when, employees are not necessarily communicating in a professional manner, or they're sending, photos and emojis and gifs and things of that nature that can be misunderstood. Okay. One of the issues that I got involved with, I think this was last year, back in 2024, we had a situation with a client in California. It seems to always be coming out of California, right? To where it was on a Microsoft Teams type of a communication platform, and people were kind of going back and forth, and they were talking about, um, you know, uh, somebody needed to cover a shift, and somebody used, one of the managers had used like a meme of a movie, right? And this was a movie, I guess, that was, like in the 80s, and some of the employees that were on that thread were not old enough to recall, to have seen that movie. They didn't get the context. If somebody without context looked at the photo, it could be deemed to be offensive, right? And then the wheels just fell off of the entire situation, right? We then start, talking about, hostile work environment claims, a bunch of other issues. There were some racial undertones, just a very poor use of judgment, and something that could have been easily avoided, right, had we spent time drafting a policy and educating the supervisors that, look, whether it's text, whether it's Microsoft Teams, or any other type of communication mechanism, it doesn't necessarily have to be text to phone. In this umbrella of texting, I also, instant messaging, Slack, Microsoft Teams, any kind of, quick chat back and forth between employees, needs to be regulated, monitored, whether by management, by IT, to make sure that things are not going on, um, that should not be happening, or that are outside the scope of your policy. Okay. Um, One of the bigger issues, especially out here in California, it's not as problematic in some states, um, but you need to be careful of the timing of when you are sending the communications. Okay. Um, and this is a federal law, so it's something that you need to be paying attention to regardless of where you are located. Um, if you are texting or communicating, emailing, calling employees outside of their normal business hours, then that's considered compensable time. Okay. That's the law everywhere, but here in Southern California, this issue is a huge target for plaintiffs' attorneys. Okay, I see, emails, flyers. They're on the radio out here, trying to drum up business from employees. That if your manager is calling you after hours, if you're a non-exempt hourly employee, you're working from 8 to 5, and then you clock out, and on your drive home, your manager is calling you. They're asking you questions about, your workday. They're sending you emails or texts after hours, and they're not paying you for that. That is a huge red flag and an easy claim, because the phone records, right? They have phone records, and they can show that, employee Brett clocked out at 5 o'clock, and then here's the phone number from the employer calling at, after 5, 6, 7, 8, and that time was not paid, on the subsequent payroll. So it's an easy, lawsuit for these plaintiffs' attorneys, especially out here, but I'm starting to see it trickle a little bit, in the other states as well. New York, New Jersey, Illinois, a lot of these, states that are more advanced in employee, um, uh, I should say, legislation that favors the employee versus, other states that have a lot of legislation that favors the employer. This is something to be careful with. Okay. Your managers need to understand that when an employee clocks out, right, unless there's an emergency, unless there's a solid business justification, we should not be communicating with, texting with employees after hours. Okay. It can wait until tomorrow. And if it can't, then that's okay, but we need to document it and make sure that it gets paid. Um, Yeah, so timekeeping practices, right? So this is when you're in the handbook, you're talking about the communication um, protocol, right? Is it okay to text or call after hours? And if it is, if there's a business justification, then that's okay. But then the employee and the manager need to then agree, and somebody needs to then make sure that the timesheet is edited so that that time is captured and they're paid for that, so that we don't have any FLSA violations. Um, some common policies that are, kind of tangentially related here to what we're talking about is the sick and vacation requests, right? We're talking about communication issues, this is another one that comes up a lot. Okay. Is it acceptable to call in sick or request time off via text? Okay. Um, if your policy is yes, this is okay, that's fine. We don't have any issues with that as long as everybody's on the same page and they are clear as to what the process is, how to notify management, how to notify HR, so that everybody's communicating together. The issue here is when you have maybe a medium to large size organization that has different layers of management. Maybe you have mid-level management, HR, senior management, and those people are not communicating with each other. Whether you're using, the pay entry software to be able to have these conversations or message through the workflow. But I've had this happen a handful of times, and the fact pattern with this particular issue is something like this, right? If Tony is not coming in today. Maybe Tony, has had some attendance issues in the past. Okay, but today he has, he's sick. Okay, and with all of the states now that have sick pay legislation, if an employee has sick pay and they are, they call, they follow the request process to utilize it. It's supposed to be, don't ask, don't tell. We're not disciplining anyone that is using their sick time if they have some available, right? But perhaps Tony, over the past few weeks, he's come in late, he's had some attendance issues, managers have spoken with him and they've put him on a warning, right? Hey, Tony, we can't have any more attendance issues. If you are late again, or if we do, then we are going to have to, um, you know, go through further corrective action up to and including termination of employment. So maybe Tony texts me, his manager, and says, "Hey, Brett, you know what? I'm not feeling well, or my child is sick today," which is obviously covered in every state, that has the sick pay. I can't come in today, but I'll be in there tomorrow. He followed the process that's outlined in our handbook. He's on a protected leave now, under any state and federal law. There's nothing we can do about that. But if I don't necessarily talk to HR about that, or I don't let senior management know, maybe they try to get a hold of Tony and he doesn't answer, or they walk by his office and they don't see him, and they assume that he's a no call no show. And I've had this happen to where somebody didn't communicate, and they then terminated employment, right? And it turned out into a wrongful termination lawsuit, discrimination, a whole laundry list, because the front end manager never spoke to HR, never spoke to the senior manager, and just kind of hung that employee out to dry. So if you are going to have that process to where employees can call in sick or request time off, that's fine, but there needs to be all of the boxes checked so everybody knows, right? So as simple as, hey, whether it's in a Teams chat or a Slack, hey, I just heard from Tony, his child is sick, he's not coming in, no problem, right? So that everybody's aware, we can track everything in payroll, and everybody, and all the managers are notified, and nobody's going to then try to contact him when he's on a protected leave, or even worse, terminated employment. That's going to get us in hot water. Okay. Um, Texting with clients is another um, policy that you're going to want to add to your handbook. Especially if you have salespeople. Is it okay for your salespeople to text clients, to text prospects, um, etc.? What are the parameters? And again, it needs to be very clear, right? Especially in a sales environment. We have sales professionals here at Pay Entry, and we need to make sure that it's very clear for them, that they understand that we're only, if they are going to text clients, and we do permit them to text clients, but it's only during regular business hours. Okay. And it's only with regards to business related matters. We're not texting jokes or political memes to clients. We're not asking them what their NCAA tournament bracket is looking like coming up for later this week. It's got to be professional, and it's got to be within business hours. We had a client here that had a situation with one of their employees, and it turned into a lawsuit. And more importantly, lost revenue, because our client had a sales rep, a younger sales rep, very, very overzealous, hungry, trying to hit a quota. And he would be at home at night, 8 9 p.m., just firing off texts to to prospects, trying to set up meetings. And nobody kind of ever spoke with him and said, hey man, it's after 6 p.m., after you've gone home, we're not texting. You can send emails, you can draft emails, and schedule them to kind of go out the next morning using our marketing platform, but we're not going to be texting directly on personal cell phones to people off of your prospect list, trying to see if you can set appointments. And it was kind of embarrassing for this client, because it was a young male sales rep texting a female payroll manager, and the the payroll manager's husband got involved, ended up showing up at the client location, and caused this big mess, about, why is your sales rep, who is this guy that's texting my wife at all hours of the night, right? And just absurd. But I mean, it was repeated, it kept happening, and just spiraled out of control. So this is why it's important that when we're going through the handbook, when we're talking about these issues, that we cover all of these, right? When is it acceptable to text? Who is it acceptable to text? And what are those parameters when we're talking about time frames, so that we are not going to run afoul of any of our company policies, but we're also not going to upset any of our clients or our prospects. Okay. Um, Another piece, as we're drafting this policy, is making sure that we're not sharing company or client information. Okay. Obviously, in case the device is lost, device is stolen, we have proprietary information, confidentiality agreements. We're not sending any documents, okay, anywhere, right? The text communication should just be a kind of a check-in. How are you today? How are things going, right? Do you need any help, right? Can you cover this shift for somebody else? We're keeping it short, sweet. We're not sending, you know, pricing proposals or company policies, over via text, because they're not necessarily secured. And if that phone's stolen, or if it's lost, then we are at risk of not only compromising our own company information, but also now putting our clients at risk. Okay. People ask that all the time. We get calls at Pay Entry. Hey, Brett, I'm on vacation, and I don't have my laptop. this is Joey, from Joey's restaurant. Can you please help me? Hey, can you send me my W-2? My accountant is asking for. I got to file my taxes. Just text it to me. Absolutely not. Okay. Um, hey, can you send me my handbook? I'm trying to forward it somewhere else. Text me my employee handbook. No. Okay. We can we can email those things securely, and we can call and verify, identity to make sure that that person is actually the one who has that phone. But we should not be texting any company specific documents or any information. The other thing is too that we've had issues with people talking about different clients amongst each other. Hey man, I just closed that account. Or hey man, did you know that so and so account? Oh man, I just got off the phone with Joey's restaurant and they're getting sued. We can't talk about those things. The employees need to understand that they can't be communicating via email or via text with confidential information, especially if it includes our info, our company info, or information regarding our clients. Um, One of the other things that um, kind of gets swept up into this whole process is the device that they're using. It's another thing that we want to be aware of. Okay, is this a personal device that we are texting, we are communicating on, or is this a company device? Okay, if it's a company device, we have a little bit more control over what we can do and what we can require versus if we're asking them to use their personal device. Okay, security being the most important, right? If this is a company device, um, you know, it's assumed that we have our own internal IT that are preparing these devices, that are setting up different security, passcodes, iCloud backups, if you will, encryption, so we can add a layer of security. So when we are communicating back and forth to the employees, we can at least monitor what's going on because they're our phone, okay, and we can control what's being messaged or used on those phones themselves. Okay. If it's a personal phone, then a lot of that kind of goes out the window, right? We can't necessarily monitor the personal phone. We can't require them to install apps or programs, etc., onto their personal phones. We can ask, right? But they own the device. We don't have any control over what they do. The expectation of privacy, that's the legal term, right? If you are using a company device, whether it's a company laptop, company computer, company phone, iPad, etc., there is zero expectation of privacy, meaning you as the employer can inspect and monitor absolutely everything you want because those are your devices. Okay. So long as it is within business hours and there's a business related justification. Okay. We're not monitoring phones after hours to try to track where employees are going on their free time. That's unlawful. That's going to get us sued every time. But during business hours, sure, we can require on a company device, we can require that location is on, right? So that we can make sure that these employees, if they're out in the field, are where they're supposed to be, right? You said that you were going to visit this client. I need to make sure that you're actually there and you're not at Disneyland, right? You said that you were going to be, working at this job site. I need to make sure that you're there. We can do that. We can use the technology if those are company devices, whereas if they're personal devices, we can't. Okay. The other thing that comes along with the device usage, especially in California, it's also, again, happening in other states as well, and it's something I would highly recommend that if we have employees that are using personal devices on behalf of the company, that there is a reimbursement each month. Okay. In California, it's required. Some other states, it's not required, but highly recommended because there are new now pieces of legislation that are coming. Okay, so just to kind of put a bow on this before we move forward, if we have employees using their own devices, okay, whether they're working from home, whether it's simply just their own phone, that is out in the field, etc. It's the same theory as if we have people that are driving their own vehicle on behalf of the company and we are reimbursing them for mileage, right? We should have a reimbursement for personal device usage. Okay. It doesn't have to be a set amount. There's no law that says it has to be. It's not like the IRS mileage rate. It has to be $5, $10, $50. Most companies, especially the bigger ones, they have some kind of a tier. So what'll happen is something like this. If it is a employee that works primarily from home, right? It's fully work from home, then maybe you're going to give them, a little bit more. Maybe it's $100 a month that employee would get from working exclusively from home. They're using their own laptop, their own computers, their own printer, their own ink, their own phone, performing work for us. So we're going to give them $100 a month because, they're using their own equipment, right? Or maybe it's somebody who's hybrid. Maybe they come in the office 3 days a week and they only work at home twice. Well, maybe then we just have $50 a month. Okay. Maybe it's somebody who works in the office exclusively, right? But they're using their phone. Maybe it's a sales rep or customer service, and we're making them use their own phone. Well, okay, well maybe it's just a phone, so it's only $20 a month. Okay, you can set the scale however you see fit when it comes to these reimbursements, but this is also a recruiting tool as well. I see a lot of companies that are now adding this, right? And it's something that the younger demographic of employee is absolutely looking for. I want to work from home, but what type of a reimbursement are you giving me, right? Am I working from home using all of my things and you're not going to reimburse me for anything? I'm losing money. That doesn't seem fair, right? You might not have to do it depending on the state that you're in, but you might choose to be able to recruit, right? Attract, retain top tier candidates. Um, we can help, right? I'm glad to help. Whether it's just having a quick conversation with you, um, send an email to our HR services team. You can send me an email directly, and we can just have a conversation. What does your policy look like? What are the different moving pieces, right? Do you have multiple layers of management, and we have people communicating, and things kind of get lost in um, translation, and we need to kind of draft policies, but then also educate the supervisors so that they are not making these silly mistakes that can get you in hot water. Okay. Do you have managers that insist on calling employees after hours? They insist on trying to find out what's going on because they're busy during the day. Well, that's okay. The intent behind the phone call is irrelevant, right? It's the timing, and we have to have that cost benefit analysis. Does this make sense for the owner, the manager, the employee, the supervisor to be contacting these employees after hours? Or do we need to help them manage their time better and schedule morning check-ins to get all this information, so that we're not contacting people after hours and triggering FLSA violations? Again, on the pay entry HR team, we're here to help you, right? Over the past 6 months, we've completely revamped our department, and we have a lot of different services for all shapes and sizes of businesses. It is not just a one size fits all. Okay. It's important to us, that we continue to support our clients, right? And we continue to grow our businesses together. So we have some clients that just need a little bit of help. Hey, Brett, you know what? I've got HR support on staff here. We know what we're doing. We might just need to run this by you as a one-off. Can you look at this for us? Absolutely, we can. Right? We have clients that don't have any HR. Like, Brett, man, I'm the business owner and the marketing manager and the sales rep and the bookkeeper. I'm doing all these things together. I don't have time for any of this. Can you please, take the wheel here and keep me out of trouble? Absolutely, we can do that. Okay, we have something for everybody, and what we're here for is to be able to have that conversation with you and just talk through it. How might we be able to help? Tony and Jenna on our HR business development team are here to meet with you, myself included, and we'll just give you an honest opinion. Hey, here's what we think. Here's how I think you can, improve your policy on the communications. Here's how we can make some adjustments depending on the state that you're in, so that moving forward we don't have any issues, and we can kind of clarify this so that everybody's on the same page. I wanted to kind of stop here for a few minutes. Do we have any questions, guys?
We do. I have a few questions in the
Okay,
chat for you, Brett. I'll just read them
sure,
off to you. Dean
please.
asked if, in regards to texting, if this applies, if even if the employee is not expected to reply during working hours. So, for example, if I text our marketing supervisor
Mhm.
just to let her know I'm not going to be into work tomorrow, and I send that at 7 o'clock at night, she's not expected to respond. But is that an infringement on her time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer to that question, I think it would depend on where you're located. I think in California that's problematic because I think an employee would say, "Well, I felt compelled." You know, I'm stressed out because my manager continues to message me, and I felt compelled to respond. But that's not the case in all the other states. It's only if there's the back and forth. If you sent just a message, even if you clarified, "Hey, I don't need to know the answer until tomorrow, but here's what I'm looking for. Respond tomorrow when you get to work." That could solve that problem. But it's again, it's just one of those things that you're now in a gray area, and I don't like gray areas when it comes to employment practices. We want to be the same as everywhere else, right? A lot of issues that I get involved in, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of employee disputes arise from inconsistent or poor communication. Okay. You want to, when it comes to handbooks and employment practices, etc., we want to be like the Joneses, right? We want to be the same as everybody else, because the employees, especially, and I keep going back to the younger demographic of employees, because that's where a lot of this, heartburn comes from, right? Is they bounce around to organization to organization, and I hear all the time, "Well, my other job didn't do that. My other job, they never texted me at 7 o'clock. My other job, they never asked me to do this. My manager never called me. So why are you calling me?" And they're wired to automatically just feel like something's wrong and that their rights have been violated, and they're going to come in after us with guns blazing. So again, it's not as easy as yes or no. It's a case by case basis that we can kind of dive into together and say, okay, well, what line of work are you in? What's the justification for asking for it? Is there something else that you have internally that we can use to um, ask that question, or pose that question in a different format, right? With more clarification, so it's not on the personal device, right? And if the answer is yes, such as, okay, you can ask that question in Microsoft Teams and ask them to respond that when they get in at 8 o'clock the next morning, because we know the employee, being non-exempt, would not have Teams on the phone. So they wouldn't be obligated, or they wouldn't feel like they had to reply to you right away, so that they could, see it when they log in next morning. That's a solution versus pinging them on the personal phone. Okay? But good question.
Our next question comes from Thea, and she is wondering if you have some samples of cell phone policies.
Absolutely, absolutely, we do. Thea, you can send a message, and be glad to, send you one of those. But yeah, we have different samples, different templates, in our HR dashboard. There are some templates, then obviously as part of our HR services offerings, would then draft those, customize them, coach and train. So there's the kind of the full gamut, right? If you simply just need, a cut and paste job to be able to implement it on your own into your handbook and across your organization, be glad to help. or if this is something like, well, no, we really probably, it's a little complex. We need you guys to kind of come in and provide the analysis. We'd sure be glad to do that as well.
Thank you. This next question comes from Shelley asking if staff should refrain from sending confidential information through Teams.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in my opinion, I think so, yes, because especially, depending on who's accessing that, right? If it's going to, if it's on a channel, okay, or it's encrypted to where only exempt employees, maybe people who have company devices that can easily be locked or wiped should there be an issue, then maybe that's something you want to consider for your policy. But if you're sending this to like a group of people and there are also non-exempt employees, or if you are sending this to people and they're using their personal phones that we cannot just lock and wipe, then I would say yeah, because employees, man, you don't know what they're doing. This happens all the time. We had just a few weeks ago, and I mean, if, if you don't know me very well, I know some of you on this call, we've had the opportunity to engage a few times, and we've worked together in the past, but I've got a story for everything, and I think that's what makes us unique, because I've been doing this for so long and I've seen absolutely everything. Okay. Yeah. And yesterday was St. Patrick's Day, and I was reminded when I was preparing and reviewing all this stuff yesterday. I think this was 2 or 3 years ago. We had an employee who was out after hours, right? Had the company the company tablet. He had the iPad. So somebody in like a pharmaceutical sales type, but he had some confidential information. There were some client information on there. HIPAA protected, and this guy was out, St. Patrick's Day, out, at the bar after hours, and who knows what the heck the guy was doing, but he ended up, leaving the company vehicle, unlocked, or it got stolen or whatnot, and all the stuff was in there, right? So the company vehicle was gone, and in that was this iPad that wasn't necessarily encrypted, and there was all kinds of HIPAA information on there, right? And this is like, what are you doing, right? Like, if you're going to go out, drinking, then you probably don't want to take the company vehicle. Probably don't want to have your, your work things and computer and iPad and all those things in there to put yourself in that position, right? That stuff should be locked. It should remain at home. It should remain at the office. And yeah, they had damage control. They had to pay thousands, you know, 5 digits, into the damage control they had to pay to, cover that mistake, right? So I would say that, yeah, it's probably best if you don't have confidential information on any of those communication mechanisms, right? It's going to be via email, and there's going to be some kind of encryption, so that it requires a password or something similar to be able to access.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Arlene, and in regards to an employee who's communicating sick time, what is the best way for us to document that? Should that be like a soft copy or a hard copy? And I think when she says soft copy, she means like a digital copy.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question, and you're kind of getting into a whole nother other topic here with regards to documentation and progressive discipline. But we have a few extra minutes here, so I'll be glad to share some of my tools, especially because you guys have been patient with me this morning, as we work through some of these technical glitches. Um, I think it depends on the workforce and the way that the demographics are changing. The progressive discipline approach is usually best starting off soft, okay, and then we move to hard copy as a final. Okay, that's my preferred approach. And I'll give you a quick example. Okay, um, Tony calls, and and he says, "Hey, Brett, I can't make it in today. I'm not feeling well." Okay, he's going to call me. or he texts me or whatnot. That's fine. However, he wants to message me according to my policy, I'm fine with, but I'm going to reply to him via email, via his business email. Okay. Tony, thank you for the text this morning. Tony, thank you for the call this morning. Just to confirm, on Tuesday, March 18th, you are using 8 hours of sick, you know, and then moving forward, just so you know, you are now all out of sick time. You've used the entire 48-hour allotment that the state of California has given you. So, any further usage is going to go unpaid. Okay, something like that, just via an email. I wouldn't text back because that just makes a mess. Emailing is easier because then we can just sort by name, and then we can take all of that and put it in the employee personnel file, so that we have its date and time stamped, right? So the next time that this happens in 3 weeks from now, when he calls again, okay, and maybe now I look back and I say, geez, it's March and he's already exhausted all of his sick and all of his vacation, clearly having some attendance issues. Now maybe I can take all of that and I can transition now to the final written warning, okay? And it makes my life easier because the final written warning now, it takes 2 minutes for me to cut and paste all of the data from one file to the Word doc, okay? Tony, we're having some concerns with your attendance as evidenced below, right? March 18th, at 10:49, a.m. Pacific, right? February 1st, boom, boom. I have all the dates and timestamps of all of these incidents that he's called, and it's easy. So now when he comes back in, I can sit down with that document and present it to him, and he's got nothing to argue about because it's all right there in front of him.
Latonia is asking if there are any text communication recommendations for exempt employees, like, for example, if they're on PTO.
Yeah, that's a great, great question. And I know that the majority of the content today we were geared towards, non-exempt because that's where the lawsuits arise. But yeah, when you're talking about any employee, okay, you have, and this is what, makes HR, so complex. I enjoy it because I learn something new every day. But you don't only have the legal issue, how not to get sued. You also have the HR issue, how not to burn out and upset your best people. Because that's another thing that's real. We have a lot of clients. I'm hiring, I keep turning people over. I just lost my best guy, and I dig into it and I found out why, and that's the exact fact pattern, right? I'm on vacation. I requested vacation. That means don't contact me. Period. And it works both ways. As an employee, you're not logging in, you're not texting people, you're not messaging, you're not emailing. And as the employer, you certainly should not be messaging any employees when they're out on any leave of absence, whether it's sick time, whether it's vacation, whether it's maternity leave, any type of leave of absence, right? There's a zero communication policy, and that's how it should be drafted in your handbook and messaged, right? If Brett's on vacation, leave him alone. It's on vacation, right? Great, yeah, it happens a lot, and people are like, deer in the headlights. Look, it's like, yeah, I just lost my best sales manager. Well, why? Right? And I would do an exit interview with the sales manager. Yeah, they don't ever leave me alone, right? Owners call me every 5 minutes. I'm with my kids on the weekends. They're blowing me up, and they're texting, they're calling. I'm on vacation. I just, it's not worth it anymore. There are no boundaries. So yeah, when the owner was like, well, I'm paying him a salary. I can text and call whenever I want. You sure can, right? You don't have a legal issue. You don't have an HR issue because nobody wants to work for you because you have no boundaries. So that's another reason why we are here, to cover both of those steps, not just the bare minimum of making sure you don't get sued, regardless of what state you're in, but the HR piece too. Make sure that you have policies that are clearly communicated, that are attractive to all of the employees, right? And you can message this, and this is why this is a healthy work environment, a place that you want to be in, so that you can um, feel valued, right, and respected when you come to work here. Great question.
Thank you. Our next question is from Ryan, and she is asking if their company already has a cell phone policy in place do they still need to pay employees for messages sent outside of regular business hours?
Yeah, so that is going to be compensable time. So the answer to that question is yes, right? Regardless of whether or not you have a cell phone policy, okay? Um, this is the Fair Labor Standards Act is a federal law, okay? And that requires that if that employees are compensated for all hours worked. And if you are calling them outside of the hour business hours, if they are, you know, clocked out and you're calling or you're emailing and you're expecting an exchange, that's compensable time. Okay. Again, in California, this is a huge red flag issue that it happens. I think I'd say maybe 2 or 3 times a month. I get involved in, whether it's pre-litigation demands, agency complaints with regards to this fact pattern. It happens a lot, and it's a very easy target for plaintiffs' attorneys. In other states, not so much, right? And Texas, Arizona, it happens a lot, but it's not as big of an issue because people are focused on other things. It doesn't mean it's right. It's right. It's still wrong, right? So if there was an issue and they found this, you'd be responsible. You'd be held liable for the compensation. Okay. And the problem that I have with it is that it's super easy to discover. Okay, because your employees that have a phone, they have a phone bill, and you can pull the phone bill online and you can see all the phone numbers, right? And then you have the timesheets that they're using. The timesheets are also easily discoverable. It's on the timekeeping software. So if I'm an employee, I pull up my timesheet and I see that I clocked out at 5, and I pull up my Verizon bill and I see that Dina called me at 5:10, right? Here's the day, here's the day. Look, they didn't pay me for that, and you're sunk, right? This is not like anything that we can argue in court. It's cut and dry. You're on the hook, and it's easy for them to prove. So that's why we want to make sure that we're talking about this. And look, the first question that you have to ask is it worth it for me? Is there a business justification for me to pick up the phone and call that employee? Maybe I need to know, right? Maybe the alarm, maybe a common example I see is security issues. LAPD just called and they said the alarm's going off at the restaurant. Nobody's supposed to be there. Somebody might be breaking in. Hey, Brett, you're the closest person. Can you go down there and handle that? Sure, that's an emergency. No problem. We need somebody to be there, right? But then you have to pay me for that, right? You say, hey, you know what? You answered the phone. How much time did it take you to drive over there? An hour? Okay, no problem. You know what? I'm going to make sure that I talk to payroll tomorrow and we add another hour onto your day because you helped out with that situation. No problem. Okay. But just because you're the manager, you're the salesman. I see this a lot. The sales manager is stuck in traffic on the way home and he's bored. So he's just going to pull up the phone and start calling everybody to ask questions. Hey, who did you meet with today? How did that deal go? Did you close this? Did you do that? Did you do that? Right? And that's the issue. That's usually the fact pattern that gets people in trouble.
Great, thank you. One more question I think we
Yep.
have time for.
Sure.
This is from Monica. She owns a bakery, and her bakers work during after hours. Of course, it's a grueling job actually to own a
Sure.
bakery. So my hat's off to you. But she's wondering because she messages after hours quite a bit through an app, if there's some sort of statement they can add to their handbook hours that they could be messaged, like essentially disclosing that there might be times when we're not working that could be messaged to
Yeah.
advise things like we're closed and things of that nature.
I think that's a great point that you make, and that's something that's absolutely included in these types of policies. Is yeah, look, it's not my intention to call you after hours, but due to the nature of the work that we are in, it might happen, and when it happens, you're expected to reply immediately, right? We can set that expectation, right? I just drafted a policy like this a few weeks ago. We have a client here in Southern California that is a disaster response company, right? And they don't intend to respond to disasters on the weekends, but you never know, right? when the customer calls, we need to be there. If there's a fire, if there's an issue, we need to be there, right? So the employees know. In this policy, it states, hey, look, we understand that the weekends are your family time, but you're also an exempt employee, and you're on the clock, and we're paying you a salary to be able to perform. So if we call you on the weekend, you're expected to reply within an hour. Okay, just the line of work that we're in. It happens a lot in the medical field as well. you know so you have to be careful, because on call is a legal term of art, and it has different requirements depending on what state you're in. So we don't want to put in on call language and trigger a bigger problem if it's not necessarily on call. But we can draft a policy that addresses that specific situation that you described there at the bakery. Absolutely. If you have any questions, I want to make sure that you know how to get in hold of us. HR services at PayEntry. That is our email. It goes to Brett. It goes to the entire HR services support staff. That is the preferred way to get in touch with us. That it goes to the whole team, and then that way the next person available will be able to give you a call and answer your question. So thank you guys. I apologize again for the hiccups, and have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you next month.